Welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast, where we address the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. This is the time, my friends, for a deeper renewal of your Christian vocation. Come and enter into the freedom of Christ that allows you to be the person you were created to be, because there's an amazing, awesome, exciting next season of life waiting for you. Hello and welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. You are here with Karen and Curtis Herbert.
Hi, everybody.
And this is episode 103, 5 Reasons Goals Are Not Accomplished.
Ooh, this is a good one.
This is. And friends, this is our last goal episode. So stick with us to the very end and we'll give you a little teaser for what's coming next because I'm really excited about that.
Oh, excellent.
So we had a comment from a listener this week. A very kind and generous listener who said, I just love your podcast. I cannot wait until Wednesdays when it comes out. I wish you would do more of them.
Oh, that is so kind.
Yeah.
We
maybe
really,
someday.
Yeah. We really appreciate our listeners. And thank you so much for that feedback and the kind words.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, goals, honey, it's one of those things where our stomach sinks when we start to think about goals.
Well, I'm excited to think about them, but then doing them that's when I get that funny feeling.
I think we all have a little baggage around goals.
Ooh, right.
Goal setting, goal achieving. I certainly do. And in fact, I struggle to make goals. I'm pretty good at intention setting, but the whole goal thing, I have to be very, very on top of it.
Yeah, very specific. We hear a lot of things about why goals aren't accomplished, and often it's just, oh, I'm lazy, or I forgot about it. I didn't really know what I was doing. We think the reasons goals aren't achieved go a little deeper than that, because we are not lazy. This is not a lazy audience. We know you are not lazy.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
So what's up? I mean, what's not happening when we don't quite hit the mark that we're aiming for?
Consider the things that we're going to talk about when you're problem solving and you're not getting to your goal. Here are some things to think about it, some questions to ask yourself. Now, say you are planning on being a better XYZ, whatever the thing is.
A better husband. Dun, dun, dun. No, that's for next month. Sorry.
That's you setting a goal for somebody else, and that never works.
That really never
The goals
works.
have to be for you.
Yeah.
And if you want me to be a better husband, honey, you have to set some goals for yourself that are going to help me do exactly that.
That's a great point. I received that.
Thank you, honey. And yes, I need help. I need all the help I can get. So we're thinking I want to be a better whatever it is. And that's a great place to start, but that's not a goal. That's not even really an intention. So say I want to be a better parent. Well, who doesn't? I mean, that's great. What does that mean? You're thinking about at least one of your kids in particular. Well, how would you know if you're getting better or closer to being a better parent? You might think about it and come up with, well, what I really want is I want better connection. Okay, great. That's still not a goal. It's not very specific. So what do you mean by connection? Or what is it that's going to promote connection in this particular relationship? And you might come up with a list of things, meaningful conversations, or FaceTime that's free of conflict, that's mutually enjoyable. And you could select some action items off of that list.
Yeah. So can I give an example for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I teach in my communication classes is how to create rapport with somebody else. If you have this broad goal of, I want to be a better parent, I want better connection, I want to have more positive conversations, one of your steps might be, I'm going to learn this skill of rapport and implement it. And then you can measure if you're implementing it, how well you feel like you're implementing it, and then see the effect that it's having in your conversations. So you've drilled down to something more specific that you can aim at.
Well, that's a great example of deciding to pick up a new skill.
Yeah.
And it's measurable and it's something you can do. And rapport, in a lot of ways, is about meeting people where they're at, so to speak. And not only in their words, but in their way of speaking and doing things.
Exactly.
And as you come up with this list and you start to come up with measurable objectives, things like having FaceTime and thinking of activities that are going to let it be conflict-free. As you think about all this, you're going to look out for the obstacles, think about what would be blocking your objectives. And this is the number one or the first in time reason that people aren't setting goals. There's not a clear intention. You want a goal that lets you see if you're getting there.
So someone could say, I'm not sure if I'm really getting what I want. Have I set a clear intention that's specific enough that I could tell if I'm doing it?
It needs to be measurable at some level. And then if the FaceTime isn't getting you all the relationship benefits you want, well, that's great. That's great feedback. You could start to have other ideas about, okay, well, I could do this other thing and continue to reach for my desires to have this big relationship.
Curtis, I think another thing that happens when we're approaching our goals is we just, we want the thing, and somehow our passion, our mojo, it's just not there. I mean, like when you're excited, you're looking forward to an activity, it has a way of fitting into your schedule. It's just human
absolutely.
nature.
And there's some activities I enjoy, and they have a way of getting into the schedule.
They do.
Sooner or later.
They do.
Absolutely.
So if our desire for something is not so strong, or maybe if we have conflicting desires, I feel like that can be a real obstacle to the goal.
That's a real obstacle. As you've told me, Karen, so often our first impulse is to say, oh, I'm just going to tough it out. I'm just going to suck it up.
Yeah.
I'm the adult. I've got all these fortitude, and that's what I'm going to do. Oh, I don't have the desire, but that's okay. I'm just going to push on through. But what if we could find the desire? What if we could make that thing we want to do more attractive to us?
Well, that would be amazing. It's almost like magic if you know how to do that.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think sometimes we recognize we're avoiding something. We don't really have the desire for it. We're not motivated. And like you're saying, we just push through versus asking, what would have to be different for me to really start getting the passion around this? What would make this motivating and desirable for me?
That's a skill. That's a skill to find your inner levers and the forces that move you. However, it's a great thing to be able to shift your energy to get things accomplished that you would really love to have accomplished.
I think you have to be able to do that. I think this is very common as a place where we get stuck.
Being able to shift your emotional state in particular, a lot of it has to do with getting rid of the baggage or being able to get out of the basement where all that baggage is waiting for you.
Sure. And creating the resistance.
Yeah.
So you have to overcome it instead of stepping into something you want.
So there's that. But also, we can try some things. We could try visualizing what we're aiming for, thinking about overcoming the obstacles that we can reasonably anticipate. Just imagine doing those things and think about how great that's going to feel when we get there, when we get halfway there, when we see some progress. Simply imagining us being there with the results in the future.
One thing that helps is also connecting to your values. If you know your values, you can say, well, what's the value that I'm honoring here in this activity? What is it that is really important to me that I can focus on? How can this help me be the person that I'm trying to be? My avatar, as it were, as we talked about last week.
Connecting to our values, especially our highest values, that can be very helpful. And it's especially helpful when we've got some countercurrents. So we could honor one value, but somewhat at the expense of maybe other priorities, but focusing on why we think our goal is important and how it connects with our values, that could be super helpful, I think.
Yeah. And just one more thing that I find helpful is thinking about, well, what am I actually telling myself about this thing, this reality, this situation, this task I have to do? How am I orienting my focus around this? Because that's going to determine a lot of your emotions that you have as you're going into something.
That's right. When you get the story of what you're telling yourself, all of a sudden you start to get these insights. I'm avoiding making a call the other day. I was nervous about it. I thought the other person might not be receptive to me. And I realized, well, I was just telling myself that story. And the reality is usually people are really decent to you, even if they're not so interested in what you're telling them.
So what would you call that then, this second reason for not achieving our goals? Like no desire, lack of desire?
Lack of desire.
Okay, good one.
And here's a third really important area. And by the way, I wanted to credit Lisa Kaplan, who's a IPEC trainer. She's a coach trainer. She was one of my trainers for developing this list for me, the 5 reasons goals aren't accomplished. And really, it's a list created for coaches for us to help people identify those areas which could be tripping them up.
Awesome.
And the third item is fear of failure. Fear of failure. This can really come up, I think, with some of our bigger goals, or maybe ones that other people are going to know about that goal. You can feel kind of exposed if you're trying to make a stretch goal. And what if people make fun of you or shake their heads?
Yeah. Or they know that you've gone out there and tried and it didn't go very well.
Yeah. So there's fear of failure can be an obstacle.
I think for me, sometimes it's not the failure itself. It's that I invested a lot in it and I didn't get the results. So I want this return on investment. So when I don't get the result, I'm telling myself, I wasted time, I wasted money, I didn't get the thing that I wanted in return. But I don't have to perceive it that way. It doesn't have to be wasted time. That's my own lens that I'm putting on it.
That's a pretty good reframe, Karen. If you can invest a lot in a project and look back at it and say, well, it wasn't a waste.
Yeah. And find the things that really were very positive and learning moments and opportunities in that.
Now, all of a sudden, you've got a little bit of encouragement there to go and change your strategy. Go give it another go.
Yeah. I have a little more motivation to try it again.
Yeah. Karen, that reminds me of a seminar I heard from a fellow that was an animator at Disney, and I can't remember his last name, but his name was Dave, and he worked on Pocahontas with Pixar, among other films, or whatever you call those big cartoons. He was an artist more generally. He did some painting. He said, artists don't hesitate to redo what they've started when they see that it's going to make it really a lot better. And his example was, say I'm painting a couple people out in front of their house, and there's a tree and some landscape, and I'm getting to something like a third of the way through, and I realize, wow, I need to move that tree, or I need to reposition those people to really make this painting be what it could be. He said, I don't hesitate to start over because my redo is going to go a whole lot faster because I've already set up most of the elements, chosen the colors and so forth. And now I'm going to really make something good.
So we really do need that mindset, I'm hearing, of failure is an opportunity. And this is what's going to make me successful at my goals, is appreciating failure and being able to learn without a lot of negative stuff around the failure.
It made a big impression on me to hear that from a commercial artist, that the redo was part of the process.
So do you think sometimes this really keeps us from doing more or stepping into something new? Like, we want to avoid the risk.
We want to avoid the risk, either embarrassment or wasting our time or wasted effort.
Yeah. The thing is, it almost feels like if we're not pushing the boundaries into that new area, then we're just never in the growth zone. We're never getting to that place where we're really stretching ourselves and taking the risk and stepping into something new.
Well, growth has some discomfort to it. We don't like to change. We resist change. We have to resist change because our brains need things to stay consistent. They can't learn everything all over again every day. So when we're growing, we're changing something about how we do things. So there's some level of discomfort there.
Right. There's some kind of risk if we're truly growing.
Absolutely.
So that's fear of failure. What about number 4 on our list? Fear of success.
Fear of success. That's a curious one.
I don't think most of us hear that and understand what that even means.
That's not what comes to mind first. Now, one context is coaching. Often you get into the entrepreneurial areas or people changing jobs, things that are really big transitions. And if they're successful, well, life is really going to start changing. For instance, when I went to law school, there was a pattern of, if you're kind of blue collar family and one of you went to law school and got the white collar job, that was really hard on the marriages.
Really?
And when I was interviewing for an internship, one fella said, oh yeah, well, we all went to law school, then we got divorced.
Oh no. So there was something about that growth area that had an effect on the relationship.
It put a lot of stress on those marriages, yeah.
Wow. So your life changes, maybe even your priorities change, how you use your time might change, and your relationships will be affected.
Or last episode, you talked about the gentleman that wanted to lose a lot of weight and had this fear of being liked for, how did he put it, Karen?
I think it was, he wanted people to like him for who he was, not what he looked like.
Right.
So he had a fear that that would go along with losing the weight.
Right. Or say you want to be a public speaker, Karen, and all of a sudden you have to travel. You're being called on to travel. That's going to impact your family. Mm-hmm. It might be a reason for you to not do as much as you could to grow, to expand in that area.
Yeah. I think a lot of these things, if we can identify them and we can pull them up and look at them, we can problem solve around them. Or like my example last week, he could release that fear and move into a different space. But I think a lot of the fear of success stuff just kind of rides under the surface and keeps us from these goals we want, but never gets articulated.
So that's a curious one, fear of success. Now, the last item on the list that I have here is just not knowing how to set the goal. So this is more of a practical matter. I've gotten somewhat specific with my goal setting, but I don't really know what works.
Yeah, if I don't know where to start and I don't even know who can tell me how to get there, I'm totally stuck and I can't move forward. I can stay there for a long time.
One of our listeners in the Facebook group shared her method of getting to goals. She was a nurse and they trained her. She had a chart. She broke it down to action items every day. She put stars next to the achievements daily. And she had a system for achieving her goals. So that was really great. She had a know-how for making it happen. Karen, I think instead of trying to teach a particular system of setting goals, and there are many, there's just some tips. One is break it down to action items, have sub goals spaced over time, but also, and I think this is really helpful, you have a low goal, a medium, and then a high bar for your goal. And often we can be going along and we're not hitting our high or a medium goal. But if we have that low bar goal, then it helps us see, hey, we're making progress.
Sure.
Because continuous progress is so encouraging, even if it's super small. That's what our brain really wants to see, is some progress. So taking small steps, don't ever discount the power of taking small steps towards your goal. The biggest tip is to keep your goal firmly in mind and keep making course corrections. Expect to encounter obstacles, expect to have to revise and rethink and learn new things. That's all part of the process. Keeping after it, if we can keep going, mostly we're going to get to our goal.
Do you think also, Curtis, most people who are successful at their goals also break it down into the habits of behavior that support that goal and then focus on the habits even more than the goal? So am I creating the habit? Am I doing those smaller things? Because those are the things that will eventually get me to my goal.
The smaller things, and you know, we always use weight loss as an example.
Yeah.
Because it's top of mind for many of us, and also it's kind of a discrete, quantifiable thing. But goals for the weight are good, or they're helpful for most of us. People have different approaches on setting a weight per se goal, but the eating habits, the nutritional goals, those are always central to what it is you're trying to accomplish. So you might have a goal of not eating 2 or 3 hours before bedtime, you know, if that's your plan or the approach you're following. You might, for you empty nesters, you might start having sit-down meals instead of kind of grazing on the go.
Sure. So here's a habit that I created. I don't know if you noticed it. This was a year and a half ago. I can't remember. But I would come down the stairs because you get up earlier than me, and I would go and make the coffee. And I decided, no, what I want to do is come down the stairs and go to where you are in your office and greet you and say good morning and give you a kiss. And so I made that a habit. And it was just a way of managing this relationship where we're working and we're always together, and we can lose sight of the intentionality behind the interaction.
Yes, I did notice.
Oh.
Really, it had some impact on me to see you come down and head my way first thing.
Yeah.
So that was a nice habit, and I usually stand up for you.
You do.
To honor you.
Oh.
And greet you.
Yes, it's very sweet.
And we're starting to segue into next week's topic.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But before we tease our next season, let me just briefly recap. Is that okay?
Please.
So here are some tips. Here's some tips for problem solving when your goals aren't getting accomplished. Here's 5 reasons. One is not having a clear and measurable intention. So you want to have a better relationship, but what are the things you are going to do for that relationship? Number 2 is lack of desire. As adults, we love to power through, but what if we could find our mojo? Number 3 is fear of failure. We can not want to waste the time or don't want to be embarrassed if we are not making the progress that others would hope for us. Fear of success. That's number 4. That's kind of an odd one, but it can be lurking there, especially when it's going to force us into transition. Number 5 is simply a lack of skill in knowing how to set goals. There are goal books out there. That's the sort of skill that you can kind of pick up from print. The coaching is really for all these hidden areas, finding the motivators, finding the baggage, and helping you, listening to you as you work through any of those techniques to find out, what's missing here.
Excellent. Thank you for being with us, everyone. And just as a little teaser for our next season, we are going to enter into a season on marriage. And we're going to do something a little different. We're going to choose some skills or areas that we'd like to work on, Curtis and I. And we'll talk through some approaches, some mindsets, some tips, and then we'll try to implement them. And we'll come back the next week and we'll let you know how we did. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Karen's really been anticipating this, and I've been nervous. But I remember how every time we've gone through a process like this, there have been some hard points because change can be hard,
Yes.
but it's always been very rewarding.
Amen.
So I can shift my thinking right now and start to look forward to having some of those new blessings and graces in our life. So thanks for being here. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being here with us. The Catholic Midlife Podcast is for anyone that wants to receive the abundance of life that God has for each one of us. Take a moment right now to tell a friend about us.